Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today for our I-40, I-81 corridor study. My name is Andrea Noel. I'm with TDOT in the Office of Community Transportation. I'm the Planning Supervisor in Region 2, and we're happy to host you here tonight. A little bit about the study, which Jean will address in more detail in a minute. TDOT conducts these multimodal corridor studies approximately every 10 years. The last one that we conducted on this corridor was in 2008, so we're a little overdue. We hire consultants who collect and analyze data. They incorporate public input from these meetings and from information collected through our surveys. From all of that, they produce a set of recommendations that are then prioritized and put into a final report. TDOT utilizes the report and the recommendations from the studies to develop into projects. As Perry said, please feel free to type your questions into the question and answer box, and we'll address as many as we can tonight. Our goal tonight is to get questions and comments specifically related to the I-40-81 corridor study. Emery has put my email address in the chat box, so if you have any questions that are not related to this study, please feel free to send me your questions. I'd now like to introduce Jean Stevens. She's with WSP USA, who is our consultant tonight, and she's going to give you more details on the study. Jean, take it away.
Thanks, Andrea. I appreciate that introduction. What we'd like to talk to you about tonight is the study purpose, which I think Andrea just touched on, the stages that we're going through to complete it, and then talk to you a little bit about the current conditions on I-40 and I-81. We want to talk to you about what our analysis of the data is showing us so far about current conditions. However, we recognize that data doesn't always show us everything, and that's why we're holding this round of public meetings so that we can ask citizens and business owners to provide comments on the corridor. Toward the end of the presentation, we'll respond to questions, and we're also going to show a link on our final slide that you can complete an online survey that will be on TDOT's website. Since you registered for this webinar, you'll also get a follow-up email that has the survey link in it. The study covers a 20-year time frame, but as Andrea mentioned, the recommendations will be phased so that we have short, midterm, and long-term improvements. And it is a data-driven planning process to identify current and future interstate needs with input from people like you who live and work along the corridor and use it for your daily travels. At the end of the study, we'll have a pool of projects that are recommended that decision makers can consider as funding becomes available. This is by far the longest interstate corridor in Tennessee. It totals about 530 miles when you add I-40 and I-81 together. It spans the entire state from the Arkansas state line to the Virginia state line. And when you look at the map, also I-40 passes to the North Carolina state line. So a lot of connectivity here. Throughout Tennessee, the interstate passes through a total of 28 counties and connects 8 of the state's 11 metropolitan areas. Now, this evening's meeting is focused just on the portion of the interstate that's located in TDOT's Region 2, which would cover Cumberland and Putnam counties. However, we know that at least some of you use the corridor for longer trips, so we are welcoming comments from you on other segments if you have some. We're already deep into the first stage of this study, looking at current deficiencies on I-40 and I-81, what additional needs can be anticipated in the next 20 years, as well as where there may be opportunities to improve access and travel. In the next stage, we'll develop a list of potential solutions to the deficiencies, and TDOT has asked us to organize those into these 5 categories: highway expansion and improvement, transportation systems management and operations, which we'll talk about in a minute, safety, freight and goods movement, and transit and travel demand management. After we develop all those potential solutions in those categories, we'll evaluate them according to how well they help TDOT meet its goals for mobility, safety, and supporting the state and regional economies. Then the projects that best meet these goals will be prioritized into that 20-year set of recommendations. This slide shows the same project stages, but in relation to public engagement. And as mentioned, we've been currently evaluating current and future interstate conditions, and we've been holding a number of public meetings across the corridor. This evening is actually our last formal public meeting, so we're honored to have you join us. And as you see from this chart, we're going to continue to invite public comment through the online survey on TDOT's website, with a second round of public meetings later this year to discuss the final recommendations for the corridor. So if you have a friend who didn't make the webinar tonight, Just because this is the last formal public meeting, there is still lots of opportunity for people to take the survey. Now, we'd like to show you an overview of the types of issues that we're evaluating for the corridor. As you see here, they generally reflect the same categories that TDOT has asked us to use to organize potential projects and programs. The one that you see here in Region 2, the one we're talking about tonight, there is an orange dot over there toward the right side of the map in Cumberland County, and that was a truck climbing lane. There are also projects here on the map shown in red. Not all of them are on I-40 itself, but they're on routes that feed into the interstate, and therefore they have some traffic impact on I-40, and we think they're worth mentioning. One is in Putnam County. It's in Cookeville itself, and that is to widen State Route 136, which is South Jefferson Avenue, and widen it to 5 lanes south of I-40 all the way to State Route 111. Also, you see in Cumberland County, the long red section is the widening of US 127 north from Crossville ultimately up to Jamestown. That's part of the list of the Improve Act projects that some of you may have heard of. There's another one in Crossville in Cumberland County, which kind of looks like a little V just south of the interstate. And that is where the Northwest Connector is being built between 70 North and Highway 127. And that one we thought was worth pointing out because it will complete a multi-lane road between 2 I-40 interchanges. So we're sure it's going to increase some traffic in that area. And then finally, the little red speck on I-40 in Cumberland County is the renovation of the Cumberland County Rest area on I-40. And that, again, is one of the projects that was put on the Improve Act list a couple of years ago when the General Assembly approved a gas tax increase in order to get some projects moving. So these are things that are underway already or have been completed. We also are taking note in this study of other things that TDOT has already been looking at because we don't want to duplicate anything. And in this region, we are showing a current study, one actually that's been, I think, completed fairly recently in Baxter. And this is the interchange at Highway 56 and Baxter Road. The issues being looked at was that traffic was beginning to sometimes back up on the ramps, and there is some additional development happening in the area and getting ready for more. So TDOT has done a safety study to look in that area and look at operational improvements. So we're making sure to take account of that. Now, traffic flow is a topic where planners have a lot better data than we used to for transportation analysis. TDOT has access through the Federal Highway Administration now to actual information about people's travel, which is put together anonymously through everybody's cell phones, their in-vehicle navigation systems, and all the other devices you carry around that are constantly broadcasting where you are. This is one of those cases where it really helps us out because we can see much more about where people are traveling and where the demand is and maybe how we can begin to address it. What you see here on the map is vehicle excess hours traveled. And basically what we mean by that is how much more time people are spending on certain sections of the interstate compared to the travel time that would be expected during non-congested conditions. So on a statewide basis, this is a pretty valuable screening tool to help us zero in on the hottest of the hot spots. And not surprisingly, you see over here on the very west part of my map, which is actually outside of Region 2, you can see some of the mess that happens in the Nashville metropolitan area. And then here on the right side of my map, you see that slowdown that everybody's familiar with as people start going down Rockwood Mountain, because there's some folks that just aren't comfortable with those curves and those slopes. Now, the rest of it is showing up as green. And I'm not saying that this doesn't mean you're not going to experience congestion on I-40, even though this section may be showing up in green. Again, this is sort of a statewide perspective. I guess the other thing this suggests to us is that, at least in this area, the slowdowns that you encounter on I-40 may be often related more to non-recurring events like wrecks, as opposed to something that happens every single day. But, as I said at the beginning, we know data doesn't always capture everything. So please stay tuned for the link that we have at the end of this presentation to the online survey and let us know about your comments. In terms of safety, the team is looking at the 5 most recent years of crash data, and we're focusing in particular on crash types that tend to create the most serious disruptions to interstate traffic. For instance, something that involves a truck could often result in at least one lane closure, if not the entire direction of the interstate. Things that are involving median crossovers where people are potentially driving head on into the other lanes can be very serious. And then cases where people are actually accidentally driving off of the road often tend to be very severe injuries that require lane closures. So those are particular types of crashes we want to focus on. And then we're also doing a high-level screening on hotspots that TDOT may want to investigate further. It's with 530 miles, it's not really a detailed crash-by-crash analysis, but looking for hotspots. The map here shows color coding for crashes on a statewide level, and the darker and lighter green colors indicate a relatively lower rate of crashes compared to other parts of I-40 and I-81 across the state, which is good news. However, the most recent 5 years of crash data does show a little over 3,000 crashes in this particular region, and 27 of those were fatal. So we are looking for your input, not only on the types of safety issues that concern you on the interstate, but also some specific locations if there are some. Now, we mentioned traffic slowdowns happening in this area, and some of the ones on this part of I-40 we know are occurring because of the mountainous terrain, like driving up Monterey Mountain. The previous I-40-81 study had recommended truck climbing lanes in several locations, and I mentioned one earlier in Cumberland County. There was also one constructed in Smith County, but there are still locations that have not been built. I understand that citizens in Cookeville have been talking about the need for truck climbing lanes, so please let us hear from you on the survey about that. So in addition to these predictable slowdown areas like I just talked about, we also know that up to 60% of congestion is what we call non-recurring, meaning that it happens because of incidents like wrecks, weather, special events, things like that. These are things that adding another lane to the highway doesn't necessarily help that type of congestion, and it may not be the most cost-effective way to address it. So what TDOT has been doing for the past decade is investing more in enhanced operations and management. And I think at the beginning of the slideshow, we talked about transportation systems management and operation. And that is what we're talking about now on this slide. Some of you are probably already aware of TDOT's SmartWay program, which provides information on location of wrecks, where there is a construction zone, areas subject to flooding, if severe weather's coming up, and so on. That can be accessed either from dialing 511, or it is also an app that you can download on your phone, or you can go to their website and it will color code the road conditions in different areas. Now, in the state's largest urban areas, TDOT also has camera and radar equipment, which helps them detect incidents and monitor speeds so that they can more quickly respond to major slowdowns and lane blockages. And what you see here on the map is, again, off to the left part of my map, you see the kind of the outskirts of the Nashville metro area where they currently have some of those camera systems. And then on the right side of my map, right at Rockwood Mountain, sometime back, TDOT was able to add a couple of cameras and highway message signs just this side of Rockwood Mountain so that people could have a chance to divert to another route if there was a major incident ahead. They would have enough warning. You also see on my map that there is one weather monitoring station right on the Cumberland-Putnam County line. And that obviously is used to help TDOT figure out when roads might be icing over based on conditions. So they're continuing to invest on things like that. So given the benefits of that enhanced SmartWay system that I just talked about that's in the major urban areas, I think you'll be happy to know that TDOT has plans, near-term plans, to expand it into this part of the I-40 corridor. What you're looking at here is the proposed extent of that expansion. It would run generally from exit 290, which is Spring Street in Cookeville, to near exit 338, which is Westall Road. And it would involve the full suite of equipment that we were just talking about. It would be the overhead message boards. It would be cameras that you could tune into and see video of what's happening on the road. Advisory radio, which is good for people who may not want to look at their smartphone while they're driving. And then also the speed monitoring that I talked about. And that's not for the purposes of giving you a ticket. It's speed monitoring so that you can get the handy color coding, like if you're using Waze on your smartphone and you see areas of congestion marked with red, that data is brought to you courtesy of TDOT and that kind of speed monitoring. So this is a great example of the kinds of solutions that TDOT's been looking at for all of its interstates. And I think we're going to continue to see where else on I-40 it can be used. TDOT recently adopted its updated state freight plan, so we're going to be incorporating a lot of the issues that it identified into this I-40-81 corridor study. The state freight plan notes a large number of through trucks on I-40, and that's not surprising given that I-40 connects us to the entire nation, coast to coast. In addition, I-81 starts in Tennessee, in the upper East Tennessee portion, and then it tracks all the way through the Northeast, and at the border, it turns into a major Canadian highway. So we're talking about some really important corridors to the country, moving a lot of freight and goods, and really critical for a number of Tennessee's key supply chains. And that includes the major manufacturers that are locating in Cookeville and Crossville and in other parts of this region. So we'll be looking at how it supports the economy and how it can better support the economy. Keeping traffic moving, and particularly trucks, I think we're all beginning to appreciate in this current crisis just how important it is to be able to continue getting those goods delivered. In terms of transit, there is one area that we've marked here with the purple, one area of this region that is served by regular fixed route transit service in Cookeville, and that is currently operated by Upper Cumberland Human Resources Agency. The HRA also provides rural public transportation services to all the counties in this area. That helps people get to medical appointments and some of their other needs like shopping, so that those vehicles are using I-40 for a lot of inter-county trips. That's important to keep in mind. In terms of other transit issues, with the scale of a 535 or 530 mile corridor, the transit recommendations in this study are going to be focused more on longer trips between major cities. In terms of that service, currently, Greyhound operates statewide through the whole I-40-81 corridor, traveling between Bristol and Memphis, and it stops here in Cookeville and Crossville. So that's the current state of service. We know it's not really extensive, and we're looking for your input and comments on that level and type of intercity transit service that's available. At this point, I would like to stop and provide an opportunity to address any questions that may have come in so far. Perry had invited you to go ahead and type some if you had them. And if you have been focused on watching the slides and listening and maybe haven't had a chance yet to multitask and open that question and answer box and type in a question, now would be a good time for you to do that. You can start typing and I'll be looking to see if anything has come in. If we're not able to get to everybody's question, or if your question needs a little further thought on our end, we will be able to follow up with you individually, since when you registered, you provided your email address. So everyone will get answered, even if it's not right away. So let me take a look now and see what we have been getting. Okay, and I see that Emery has texted the link to the survey if you want to see, if you see that in your chat box, and I'll put up a slide toward the end here that has the survey link on it as well, but if you want to go ahead and copy and paste it, it's there. All right, let's see on questions. Somebody has asked, where can I get more information about some of the projects that you're showing that are underway? Okay, if you are interested in that, here's something you can Google. Google TDOT SPOT, S-P-O-T, like the dog. I think that stands for Statewide Project Tracker. And that is an interactive statewide map of projects. They do a great job making that very easy to use, and you can get information. So if you missed that part of the show, or if I went through that slide too quickly, you can Google TDOT SPOT to get that information. Okay, here's a comment. Truck lane in Putnam County from mile marker 290 to 300. Okay, great. We got that. And please, when you take the survey, put that in there again, just to be sure that comment gets addressed. Okay, here's another one. Will the COVID-19 pandemic impact the overall I-40-81 corridor study timeline? Oh, that's a good question. Well, there's no doubt that it has slowed us down. We had to reschedule the public meetings in Nashville and Cookeville once because of tornadoes, and then literally no sooner had we gotten new dates and meeting facilities reserved and starting to get public word out, and COVID-19 came along, and the governor very wisely decided to limit public interactions. So yeah, that certainly has put us down some. But I think we're going to easily be able to finish within this year. When will more truck lanes be constructed on I-40, especially between Cookeville and Knoxville? If it's truck climbing lanes, if that's the question, certainly this study is going to recommend areas where we feel like operationally traffic could really benefit from being able to have cars pass trucks that are moving a lot more slowly. If that's not what you mean, then ask another question and let me try to address it better. Given the number of people working in Nashville from this area, do you anticipate multimodal transportation being looked at? That's a good question. We had the opportunity to do some other work for TDOT last year for the city of Baxter, looking at the conditions along Highway 58, 56, sorry. I'm from East Tennessee. We have Highway 58 over there. And we noticed that there is actually a park and ride lot right there at I-40 and Highway 56. And each time we were there doing field work, that parking lot was full. So I definitely see that there seems to be a real demand for carpool services. And I would be interested to hear from those of you who are filling out surveys for us, which I hope all of you will. If you've got opinions on what types of multimodal transportation might be needed, we'd love to hear it. Now, of course, there is currently commuter rail from downtown Nashville out as far as Lebanon. That project was done fairly inexpensively because there was already some track there, but it is still not really, it's not that heavily used. I will say it's gotten a lot better, but the ridership's not heavy. So the chances of that being expanded beyond Lebanon probably would depend partly on whether ridership increases on the part of the line that's already there. Emory has made a note here for everybody that yes, that East Corridor commuter rail line has the distinction of having been the least expensive, the best budgeted project in the nation. Let's see. So if you guys are interested in van pooling, or you see the opportunity for more park and ride, or if you think there's a chance maybe for the Upper Cumberland Human Resources Agency to be doing some service, maybe some long trip service between Cookeville and Nashville, we'd be interested to hear those suggestions. Having worked in the Knoxville area, there is some demand between Knoxville and Sevierville, which is a little less of a trip, but still, I think it shows that there can be a need. Okay, Mr. Day says, yes, I meant truck climbing lanes. Yeah, if there are particular locations, and I think one of you has already identified mile markers that you'd like to see it, this is definitely the place to be making those suggestions. The tough thing, and I'm not an engineer and I'm not a geologist, but as you all know, by driving that section every day, the tough part is getting space to build the truck climbing lane, because as soon as you start digging into the mountain, the rock starts falling. In fact, I helped work on the last corridor study that was done for I-40, and I was going home to visit my parents in Roane County, and I saw a lot of rock clearing being done on the side of the road. I was excited because I thought a climbing lane was being implemented, but I realized about a year later, no, they were just trying to clear rock off the road because it's crumbling. So, engineering feasibility is always the biggest question, but we'll certainly be identifying locations where truck climbing lanes are desirable. These are great questions. Let's see. Okay, we have one of our participants is the director of TDOT's Region 2 office, which is based in Chattanooga, but certainly covers this part of I-40, the Crossville, Cookeville area. And he welcomes you all to contact him if you have any questions about Region 2 Improve Act projects. Emory, if you can see his question, could you copy and paste his chat there's the phone number into the chat box so that everybody has it? Okay, and I've got another question here, or maybe it's a comment. There's a dangerous curve where I-40 East veers left, but can be confusing because the exit to Smithville is in the driver's direct line of sight heading straight off the interstate. Can that be straightened out? This is before Cookeville. All right, with that location identified, that's certainly something, now that we've looked at crashes, we could be looking and seeing if that's a hot spot. Thank you for identifying that. Question here, is the survey your preferred method to receive comments? Yes, it is. It is, in fact. We will be able to keep a record of the things that have been brought up here in the Q&A box, but the very best way to give us your detailed comments is to fill out this SurveyMonkey link that I'm going to share with you in just a minute. Or I think Emory's already put it in the chat box, but we'll send it to you about 8 different ways. because we really want you to use that. The beauty of that is that if any of you, I'm sure a lot of you have used SurveyMonkey before, when we get the comments that way, we can dump them all into a spreadsheet and we can summarize them, and then we can slice and dice them by parts of the state and issues, and it's a really good way to go. But we'll take comments any way we can get them, because we really appreciate the excuse me, the participation. Will we be studying interchange designs? That is a good question. With a 530-mile corridor, we probably won't look at every interchange, but we are currently using travel demand models and public input to identify which interchanges are trouble spots. And those we will be looking into some more detail. We may not actually recommend a specific design. We might not say, hey, you need to change this from a diamond interchange to something else, but we will at least be identifying the interchange issues and trying to help prioritize when they should be addressed throughout this 20-year planning period. That's a good question. If anybody is with us that is a business owner or maybe uses this route to ship freight and goods, we'd be particularly interested in hearing from you. All comments are welcome. There is a lot of manufacturing in this region, and we know from working with Baxter recently that there's a lot of new manufacturers continuing to be attracted to the region, and I-40 is a huge selling point for these communities. So understanding how the trucks need to use the interstate and what the issues are and where the improvements and opportunities are is really valuable for us. We've got a lot of participants. I'm looking. This is a great turnout. We may have to do all our public meetings like this. Okay, it's looking like our questions have slowed down. If you all don't have any further ones, you can still, and I'll turn it over to Perry here in a second so that she can explain how. If you think of a question after this and you think, oh, I really wish I'd asked that, Perry is about to tell you how you can get in touch with us so that we can address that question afterward. So thank you really very much for your interest and involvement tonight. If we didn't address the question, then you asked it, we'll follow up with you one-on-one. So at this point, as my voice gives out, let me turn things back over to Perry to wrap things up.
Thanks, Jane. Thank you again for joining us today for our virtual community meeting. We hope that you learned more about the work happening along the entire I-40 corridor as well as the I-81 corridor. As Jane mentioned, you will receive a follow-up email with a link to our website and the survey. It will also include access to a recording of this meeting. Please be sure to share information regarding this study with your friends, as the study covers the entire corridor, which spans across the entire state of Tennessee. There's also quite a bit of social media. If you're willing to share that information through your social media channels, we'd appreciate that as well. TDOT does have other web-based meetings for TDOT Region 2 area surrounding Cookeville coming up this fall. Thank you so much for joining us, and good night.